It usually doesn't happen at 65. It happens much earlier, in a much quieter moment. A person is sitting in their car after work, or lying awake beside someone already asleep, or staring at a kitchen counter covered in ordinary things they once thought would signal stability.
Mortgage statement. Credit card app.
A retirement account they haven't checked in months,
Maybe years.
and for a few seconds, a thought slips through all the noise.
I might be behind.
Not temporarily behind. Not this month was weird behind. Not once things settle down, I'll catch up behind.
Actually behind.
That realization hits most people later than they think, and when it hits, it rarely feels financial at first. It feels biological.
Tight chest. Heavy silence.
A strange pressure in the throat. A sudden awareness that time is no longer an idea.
It has become a number.
And that age, for a lot of people, is somewhere in the late 40s to early 50s. Not because that's when disaster begins. Because that's when denial becomes harder to fund. That's the real shift. When you're younger, being behind is still abstract. It's uncomfortable, but survivable in your own mind. You can tell yourself a story. I'm still figuring it out.
I had a late start.
My big break just hasn't happened yet.
I've got time.
Plenty of people turn things around.
And some do.
But somewhere around 47, 48, 49, maybe 52 depending on the person, the emotional machinery changes. Not because you suddenly become wiser. Not because the math changes overnight. Because your inner excuses start colliding with your outer reality. Your parents are older now. Your body gives you more feedback. Your job may still pay you, but it no longer feels immortal. Your children, if you have them, are becoming expensive in more adult ways. You start seeing people around you get laid off, divorced, burned out, diagnosed, downsized, replaced, or simply exhausted. And for the first time, you can feel the edge of your own runway. That's why this age hits differently. It's not the age when people become behind. It's the age when they can no longer convincingly pretend they're not. That distinction matters. Because most financial problems in adulthood are not caused by stupidity. They're caused by psychology. Smart people go broke slowly all the time. Capable people waste decades all the time. People with good jobs, decent salaries, and strong social skills can build lives that look stable while quietly rotting underneath. Why? Because the human mind is built to protect identity first and confront reality second. And nothing threatens identity like the idea that you've spent years working hard and still may not be where you should be. So the mind does what it does best.
It edits. It reframes. It delays.
It says, I'm not behind, I'm just busy. It says, I've had a lot going on. It says, once this season passes, I'll get serious. It says, I deserve to enjoy my life. It says, at least I'm doing better than most people. It says, everyone has debt. It says, retirement isn't even realistic anymore anyway. That last one is especially dangerous. Because once people feel shame around the gap, they often switch from planning to philosophy. They turn their avoidance into a worldview. They don't say, I'm scared to look. They say, the whole system is broken. They don't say, I've drifted. They say, nobody knows what tomorrow holds, so you might as well live now. And yes, some of that is true. The system is imperfect. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Life should be lived. But a true sentence can still be used as a hiding place. That's the trap. Most people do not fall behind because they lack information. Deep down, they already know the basics. Spend less than you earn. Save consistently. Don't let lifestyle inflate every time income rises. Invest early. Avoid dumb debt. Protect your downside. The issue is not ignorance. The issue is emotional resistance to what those truths require. Because building a stable future asks you to do something psychologically offensive, it asks you to disappoint parts of yourself. The part that wants relief now. The part that wants to look successful. The part that wants to be generous even when generosity is becoming self-harm. The part that wants to prove you've made it. The part that wants a reward for surviving stress. The part that wants to believe you'll have more energy later than you actually will. That's why people can be incredibly competent in their careers and shockingly irrational with money. Career decisions are often public, structured, rewarded, and measurable. Financial drift is private. Emotional. Easy to conceal. Easy to justify. Nobody claps when you quietly lower your monthly burn rate. Nobody admires you at dinner because you finally faced your numbers. Nobody sees the vacation you didn't take, the car you didn't finance, the kitchen you didn't remodel, the expensive habits you refused to turn into identity. Restraint is psychologically hard because it is invisible theater. You perform discipline for an audience that doesn't even know the show is happening. Meanwhile, the world keeps rewarding appearances. That matters more than people admit. A lot of midlife financial behavior is not about greed. It's about emotional self-protection. A person doesn't buy the upgraded car because they've done the spreadsheet and concluded it's optimal. They buy it because they are tired, and tired people are highly vulnerable to symbolic relief. The car says, I'm doing okay. The house says, I'm not failing. The trip says, my life isn't just work and pressure.
The gifts say, I'm a good parent.
The constant treating, upgrading and smoothing over of discomfort says, I still have control. Money becomes anesthesia. And anesthesia is expensive. Especially when it becomes routine. That's one of the darker truths about the age when people finally wake up. By the time they feel behind, they have often built a life specifically designed to help them not feel behind. That's why they missed it. Their lifestyle protected them from the emotional truth, even while worsening the financial one. A person can be undersaving for 15 years and barely notice if the income keeps coming, the social life stays intact, and the bills get paid. They may even feel successful.
They're functioning.
They're respected. They're traveling. They're helping family. They're maintaining the image of adulthood.
But image has a carrying cost.
And one day, usually around this age, they realize the image is being paid for with future freedom. That's when the panic starts. Not always visible panic. Sometimes it comes out as irritability. Or a weird obsession with younger people who seem ahead. Or sudden interest in markets, side hustles, retirement videos, or net worth calculators. Or a low-grade resentment toward friends who appear calmer. Or an urge to radically change everything overnight. That last response is almost always ego trying to rescue itself. Because once someone realizes they may be behind, they want a dramatic fix.
A massive year. A big win.
A perfect strategy. They don't want to accept the more humiliating truth, which is that the damage was usually done through repetition, and the repair will also have to happen through repetition. No one wants to hear that. Especially in midlife. By then, people want relief, not process. They want reassurance that their intelligence can solve in months what avoidance created over decades.
Sometimes it can't.
And that's where another psychological split happens. Some people turn that pain into clarity. Others turn it into more denial. The first group says, this is unpleasant but real. Let me see the whole thing clearly. What do I earn? What do I owe?
What do I spend?
What is this life actually costing me? How many more years can I work like this? What have I been calling normal that is actually unsustainable? That person is hurting, but they are now dangerous in a useful way. They have stopped negotiating with illusion. The second group does something softer and more tragic. They look briefly, feel shame, and then retreat back into performance. They tell themselves it's too late, or too complicated, or not worth obsessing over. They stay vague on purpose. Vague feels kinder than precise. Vague lets hope survive without requiring behavior change. But vague is where futures disappear. This is why the real financial wake-up call is not about money first. It's about self-honesty. Can you survive the emotional hit of seeing your life without the flattering edits? Can you admit that some of your spending was grief in nicer clothes? Can you admit that some of your being there for everyone was also a way to avoid being alone with your own numbers? Can you admit that some of your overworking was not ambition, but panic with a professional haircut? Can you admit that some of your delay came from a childish fantasy that a future version of you would be richer, calmer, healthier, and more disciplined than the current one? That future version is one of the biggest financial lies adults tell themselves. Later I'll get serious. Later I'll simplify.
Later I'll catch up.
Later I'll have more energy for this. But later is where people place the responsibilities they don't emotionally want to meet now. Later becomes a storage unit for unresolved reality. And then one day, later becomes now, and now is less generous than expected. That's why this realization tends to hit with so much force around this age. It's not only that time is shorter. It's that the fantasy of infinite resets starts breaking down. At 29, reinvention feels normal. At 39, it still feels plausible. At 49, reinvention is still possible, but no longer free.
It costs more.
The risks feel heavier. The body is less cooperative. The obligations are more real. The consequences of misjudgment are more emotionally expensive. So the person who suddenly realizes they're behind is not just looking at money. They're looking at diminished room for error. That is what makes the realization feel so personal. And here's the strange part. Many people are not devastated because they have too little. They're devastated because they finally see how much of their life has been built on postponement. That's what hurts. Not the number alone.
The pattern.
The years of saying yes because saying no felt small. The years of rewarding exhaustion with spending. The years of assuming income would keep rising. The years of believing that because they were responsible in other areas, they must be responsible here too. The years of confusing being productive with being secure. Those are different things. You can be productive and fragile. You can be admired and underprepared. You can be highly paid and financially cornered. You can be smart enough to run a company and still be emotionally allergic to your own balance sheet. That allergy becomes costly in midlife. Because after a certain age, the emotional experience of being behind changes shape. It stops feeling like mild guilt and starts feeling like vulnerability. You begin to understand, maybe for the first time, that money is not just about buying things. It is about reducing the number of situations in which fear gets a vote. If you have no cushion, fear gets a vote at work. Fear gets a vote in relationships. Fear gets a vote in health decisions. Fear gets a vote every time the economy twitches. That's what people finally feel when they wake up late. They're not just short on savings. They are overexposed to fear. And once you see that, a lot of status behavior starts looking different. You realize how many adults are trying to look safe instead of become safe. Those are not the same project. Looking safe is clothes, neighborhoods, restaurants, polished family photos, and a life with no visible cracks. Becoming safe is quieter.
Less cinematic. More ruthless.
It asks better questions. What would happen if the income paused? What am I pretending is temporary that has actually become my lifestyle? Which expenses are really just emotional subscriptions? Whose approval is this costing me? What am I still financing because I'm afraid of what it would mean to scale down? That last one gets people. Because downsizing a lifestyle is rarely just logistical.
It is symbolic.
It can feel like shrinking in public. Like confessing you misjudged your own life. Like stepping down from an image you spent years climbing toward. So many people avoid it. And then they pay for that avoidance with the one thing they can't print more of, future option value. This is why some people don't act even after they realize they're behind. Awareness alone does not create change. Sometimes awareness just creates discomfort, and discomfort does not automatically produce courage. It often produces distraction.
People scroll. More. Spend more. Dream more. Talk more. Anything but cut.
Anything but face the mundane surgical work of rebuilding margin. But the people who actually recover from this stage tend to do something emotionally rare. They stop trying to protect their self-image from the truth. They let the truth embarrass them. That sounds harsh, but it's liberating. Because embarrassment is often the price of accuracy. The moment someone can say without drama, I built a life that costs too much to maintain, things start moving. The moment someone can say, I use spending to medicate stress, things start moving. The moment someone can say, I am not behind because I'm cursed, I'm behind because I drifted while calling it normal, things start moving. That person has crossed an invisible line. They are no longer using language to hide from reality. They are using language to meet it. And from there, everything changes tone.
Not overnight.
Not magically.
But deeply.
Because once denial loses status in your own mind, the boring moves stop feeling boring. They start feeling elegant. Cutting recurring costs feels like recovering oxygen. Saving stops feeling restrictive and starts feeling medicinal. Simplicity stops looking like deprivation and starts looking like self-respect. That's the psychological reversal most people never talk about. At first, discipline feels like punishment. Later, discipline feels like dignity. At first, restraint feels like loss. Later, it feels like peace. At first, facing your numbers feels like proof that you failed. Later, it feels like the first adult thing you've done in years. And maybe that's the deeper answer to the question. What age do most people realize they're behind? Usually the age when their fantasy of endless time collides with the first unmistakable evidence that life is moving faster than their excuses. Usually the age when performance gets tired. Usually the age when they notice that some of their peers seem oddly calm, and they don't. Usually the age when I'll figure it out stops sounding confident and starts sounding childish. Usually the age when their private numbers begin to interfere with their public identity.
That's the age.
Not just a number on a birthday cake. A psychological threshold. A point where adulthood stops being about expansion and starts being about truth. And if there's anything hopeful in that, it's this. Realizing late is painful. But not as painful as never realizing at all. Because the people who are truly finished are not always the ones who started late. They are the ones who defended illusion for so long that reality had to become brutal to get their attention. The wake-up call hurts because it is trying to save something.
Your freedom. Your margin. Your future self.
Your ability to age without becoming trapped inside the life you built while trying to look okay. So if this realization comes, and for many people it does around that age when the room suddenly feels smaller, don't misread the pain. The pain is not proof that it's over. It's proof that the story you were telling yourself can no longer survive contact with the truth. And that might be the first useful thing that's happened in a very long time. Because once a person can no longer comfortably lie to themselves about time, they finally become capable of doing something honest with it. That's when the real life begins. Not when you feel young. Not when you look successful. Not when everyone else is impressed. When you stop borrowing confidence from appearances and start building it from reality. That is the age that changes people. And for some, it changes everything. Too late is rarely a birthday. Too late is when denial becomes your final financial plan.